All right, we have the three of us back. Even though this is like we had you last time, Scotty, but then technical difficulties, so then you missed the rerun. But we have you on this one. So give everyone an
Yeah.
update on how everything is going with you.
I think maybe you guys we recorded it and then you watched it back and you're like, fuck, Scotty's just boring everyone too much. So we're gonna crash the computer and we'll record with the two Michaels because two Michaels are better than two Michaels and a Scott. That was honestly, we all just got off and were like, fuck, that was a really good potty. And praying that you were able to salvage it because MT's an engineer wizard, but the brand new laptop just wasn't so brand new.
No. So actually, update on that. I'm getting it replaced. I said I either want to replace
Yeah,
it
so you should.
or refund, and they said you can have both. I was like, look, replace it, but if it doesn't work for a second time, it's a fucking refund. So, but
It's a
apparently,
refund and you get me a MacBook Pro.
yeah,
Just counter.
yeah. But
Yeah,
Scotty, give us an update because family has now come back to Melbs, and
they
you've
have.
been there for about a week without the fam. How's it all going over?
Almost 2 weeks now, yeah. Coming
What?
up to 2 weeks.
How's it going over there?
It's very quiet, man. It's very, very quiet. Yeah, it was really, really hard to say goodbye to all of them, especially just the kids when they were just I it was really because I we didn't Jen and I agreed that I wasn't going to make a big thing like squeezing them for too long because then they would just get upset and then she's got a 20-hour journey to get back to Melbourne. So I was kind of like, yeah, I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. You're gonna have so much fun on the plane. And they were really, really good. And they had a good time. They had a good flight back. It's killing me seeing all of their photos and even on the security cameras of their house, my phone buzzes anytime any of the motion detectors go off and kids are going wild on the trampoline. So I'm kind of just like watching them play sometimes just on the cameras out the back, which is very cool. But yeah, it's fine. I'm just trying to keep busy, man. To be fair, I've got a lot here at the moment between uni and Saracens and obviously all my online work and we've got the retreat. So just trying to keep busy.
How's all your research stuff going? You gave us an update in the potty that didn't go through, so give us an
Oh
update
yeah.
on how that's all going.
Yeah, so I'm on the home stretch. So I think I mentioned last time you were asking about the systematic review that I was doing on the nutrition-based interventions on the menstrual cycle, and it's very, very tedious. But equally, I'm on the home stretch, so I'll submit that paper this weekend, and it's going good. All of the data extractions are done, which is the tedious part, looking through standard deviations and lots of intense just data. It's mind-blowing. But I'm looking forward to having that wrapped up and equally, there's been some good takeaways and some of the stuff that I guess I've taken away from that in terms of some adjustments that I'm going to make to my research study, which will kick off in almost 2 months. So that's exciting. But yeah, full transparency, I'm just ready to wrap it up because it's just staying up till like 12:30, 1 o'clock each night, and then up at 5 every day. It's a grind. But equally, that's what post-grad study is all about. So just trying to dig and get it done. And I'll be able to send it to you. You'll be able to have a read of it in Bali so you can tell me what you think of it. And yeah, it'll be good.
I'll be like, Scotty, what's this big word mean here? What's this big word?
Deleterious. What does that word mean?
We know that
But
one.
just quickly tell us again. So you're looking at the luteal phase of the cycle and how nutrition intervention can change their performance. Is that something like that, right?
Yeah, so in my specific research study that I'm going to run, I'm looking at the follicular phase
Okay.
in nutrition-based interventions, more so carbohydrate, basically a carbohydrate versus a control group. But in this systematic review, I'm looking at the entire menstrual cycle because there's not really a lot of literature, and this is the thing, only 7 studies met the criteria for me to conduct this systematic review. So to look at just follicular phase, I think there was only 2 or 3, which is partly why I'm looking at that particular phase. Because the other thing as well, from a hormonal perspective, it's pretty much a baseline because estrogen and progesterone are low during those phases. So if we were going to see any kind of effect, it would likely be as a result of whatever that particular intervention was, not because of all of these other hormonal factors going on. So it kind of controls it a little bit more. But yeah, this one here, a lot of the stuff is in the luteal phase that I've been looking at. But equally, a lot of the papers that I was reviewing had run testing in all of the phases. So more so early follicular, the ovulatory phase, and in the mid luteal. So been kind of cool to have a look at that. And not to spoil it, but equally most of it is just based around caffeine supplementation. There's some stuff on carbohydrate loading, and there is some benefits in terms of glycogen restoration and enhanced glycogen storage in the early follicular phase. But more so, one of the biggest takeaways is just the big discrepancy between performance markers, regardless of any kind of intervention, from follicular to luteal. So most females will usually perform a lot better in that luteal phase in comparison to the follicular. So, and that was, I knew a bit about that already, and that was partly why I'm like, well, what could we do to look at trying to attenuate that in the follicular phase from a nutritional perspective? So whether or not there is anything to that, we'll find out, in the next sort of 3 to 6 months. But equally, there is some good data to suggest that supplementation of 3 to 4 milligrams of caffeine does or contributes quite a lot to enhancing performance in the follicular phase. So girls, if you're in that early phase of, you just commenced your bleed and you're looking at trying to, enhance performance, 3 to 4 megs of caffeine has been demonstrated to be advantageous.
There we go. So more monsters.
So I've just summarized like an 8,000 word paper into 2 minutes. Don't even need to read it.
Read them, bro. I don't know the answer.
No.
No.
Nah. I was actually going to contact you to part of the methodological assessment in terms of making sure there's no bias. There's a Pedro scale that you use, and it's basically 11 questions. And normally with a systematic review, there'd be more than one author. So you should theoretically have two. So I was going to send it to you and say, hey, bro, do you want to read these 7 papers cover to cover and just answer these 11 questions and see what you think? But I found another way around it. So
look, I'll do anything.
Because you would have had 10, 12 hours to spare, no dramas.
Yeah, I'll do anything for
or
you.
Or MG. I mean, you're not busy at all either, bro. So you would have had time too.
I would have read it twice, man.
Yep.
All right, let's get stuck into some questions.
Let's do it.
So, first one, straight up. What's going on with bodybuilding at the moment? Crazy new divisions all across the world. Has the sport lost its way? Also want to add in there too that today's news that someone got found out for cheating at the ICN Bali show. So that's positive. So that was another thing that we saw today on social media. So we saw a new division pop up overseas, and we also saw someone getting busted at the Bali show. So MG, what are your thoughts about those two topics?
Man, this feels like there's just been a lot going on. So I understand where the listener's question is coming from, but I think we're just in a time, man, where, there's, if you just look at the industry, there's lots of federations, there's lots of competition. The sport has been doing really, really, really well, and lots of people are just trying to capitalize on the position, and they're looking at it from a few different aspects. They're looking at profitability, they're looking at inclusiveness. So people are just trying to innovate, really. People are trying to innovate, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I think when lots of these things happen at once, it can really feel like, people are going crazy and the sport is losing its way a little bit. I don't think anyone needs to stress or panic. I think, a little bit of innovation here or there is good. And I think for the most part, the diehards, the people that support the sport, the federations, will tell you how they feel about whatever you're trying to innovate anyway. And that's happened, hasn't it? We've seen that in terms of response from, what's happened here in Australia with new divisions and stuff, and also overseas. I don't know if any of you guys read some of the comments in the innovation of what the IFBB did with men's wellness. Mm-hmm. People are basically saying it doesn't have a place. If you think about, I don't think men's wellness was brought in to raise profits, right? Like, how many men's wellness competitors did that? That was probably a decision of, giving someone a place to compete where they felt comfortable and at home, which, I don't have a problem with, but it's not going to be for everyone, and you're only ever going to hear the negative feedback about that. So I don't think the sport of bodybuilding's got any issues. I think it's the best it's been for a long time. If you look at the last 2 or 3 seasons, let's just talk about natural bodybuilding in Australia alone. There's been a big federation. We've got, a couple of other federations coming up really fast. Look at NBA, for example. Their nationals last year was massive. So I think the sport's in a great place. I just think there's a couple of little instances of people trying to be fresh and trying to bring out something new. It hasn't quite worked, so it seems like things are going a bit bonkers, but it'll all blow over and no one will even remember it in a few months' time, man, and the sport will be bigger again.
Yeah, definitely. And how about that news about the person testing positive at ICM Bali?
Yeah, man. It's nice to see people get caught. What was interesting was I didn't think that they would do the name and shame the way that they did.
Hmm.
Um, was it an Indonesian athlete?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Which,
wonder if it
yeah.
was, say, a Victorian athlete, would it have been done in the same way? If it
Hmm.
was, but I think if you look at the comments and the feedback from that, I think people want to see that sort of stuff. I think if you choose to go down that route, you got to deal with the consequences ultimately. But yeah, it's good to know that the systems in place do work. And someone that's been a promoter before, it's a difficult thing to juggle. You want to be able to test everyone, but everyone who's competed or been around for a while knows, sometimes financially it's just not possible. The arrangements that the federations have with the drug testing companies, these things can get really, really expensive, almost to a point where if you had 100 competitor show and you tested all 100, there wouldn't really be a chance to run the show wouldn't be able to run.
You'd lose money.
Yeah, because the cost of these
Mm.
tests are really expensive. And I know before I got into, the promoting side, I was a little bit surprised at what the test costs. I thought they'd be way cheaper than they are. They're super expensive. It's a hard process to coordinate, especially in Australia, because we don't have a lot of testing facilities that offer a service at a price that is reasonable. So these federations are paying, quite a fair amount of money for these tests. Yes, as natural federations, it needs to happen. But it's just not feasible to do everybody. So I think it's good that the systems work. It needs to happen more often because a lot of the time, it's coming down to luck. And I think that it needs to not be luck. I think it needs to be a system that makes sure that there's accountability all the time.
Yeah.
And hopefully we see more of that from all the feds in Australia.
Yeah. Scotty, do you remember, back in the day, they actually did do a name and shame, and they actually had a list on a website, if you
Mm-hmm.
remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
think
it's
it
still
was,
that website. That's still there, that website.
oh, is it?
But
Okay.
yeah, but it hasn't been updated for a long time.
Okay. So, the naming and shaming isn't something new. I think obviously they're trying to use it to promote the fact they are testing and they are a natural federation. They're doing what they need to do. It's also probably a deterrent too, because the last thing you want is to have your face on a post like that for sure. I got those messages too because I got tagged in that post. So I do the reasonable thing and just reshare it because it's been tagged. And I got messages say, that it says confidential on that document. Should they have really shared it? And should they be publicizing it? And I tried to give it the benefit of the doubt. And I said, well, obviously they're posting this to be a deterrent, also show it's a natural federation and they are actually testing. The document says confidential on it. Who's the owner of the document? ICN paid for it, so therefore they're the owner, I'd assume. So it's up to them if they want to publicize it or not. And also, too, I'm not too sure, but I hope that maybe in a policy or a competing policy or the policy when you sign up to be a member to a federation, that it would say on there that if you test positive, we will publicize this. So at least if there's some communication to know that it's not a surprise that potentially if you test positive, we've told you that we will publicize it. So I'm not too sure. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't looked into any kind of policies, T's and C's that ICN have when you become a member, but I think it should be in there if they're going to do those kind of things and publicize name and shame, call the person out, whatever that you want to call it. There probably should be something to tell the athlete, hey, this will happen if you do test positive. What do you think, Scotty, about that? And then we can talk about your love of men's wellness.
Yeah, I agree. I think if I would assume that when you are putting together like when you sign up to have your membership for the year, in all of that fine print that no one ever reads, it does say that if you are found to test positive, then ICN, the owner, et cetera, has the right to share and publicize any kind of information. I don't think anyone should be feeling sorry for the girl that had her name and her photo blasted on the internet. I think it serves her right, because the first thing that I think of when I see that is I just think of who's the poor girl that came second to that cheat, that didn't get to have her moment, that didn't get to stand on the podium and was this close from like tasting, success. I don't even know what she won. I'm guessing, was it sports? Was it pro
So
card or?
actually, she won her sports amateur open, so therefore winning her pro card and then
Yeah, so
show. So there's someone that missed out on their pro card potentially, and then there's someone that missed out on a first place in a pro show.
Yeah, see, that's really shit because someone misses a pro card. The person that placed second in the pro show was so close to the ultimate, and this person took that away from it. Don't get me wrong, if you want to take pharmacology, that's your prerogative, but equally just do it in an untested federation where go and compete in IFBB and go and play on that side of the field. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Equally, there's nothing wrong with naturals trying to compete with the enhanced, obviously, and not using as well. But equally, you can't then go and complain, oh, this person's enhanced because that's the rules of that federation. But in natural bodybuilding, it says that for a reason. So if you want to cheat, then you should get named and shamed, in my opinion. And then straight away I'm like, so what happens to this girl? Do they then? I hope that they then celebrate whoever came second, and that they make a big deal about she has her pro card. We apologize, etc., etc. Yeah, because it just means that like it would be a pretty shitty way to win it, wouldn't it? Being like, well, I should have won. I should have been on top of the podium. I should have had that moment with my pro card when I'm in that condition. And that may be the only opportunity that this person gets to taste that. And that moment was taken away. And sometimes it's the moment more than, anything else, because it resembles and tells a story of what that whole 6 or 8 month prep was like. So I think it's just really fucking selfish that whoever this oxygen thief is decided to cheat, and I'm glad that they named and shamed. It's something I'm really big on. I just think it's a low blow.
Yeah, and look, the federation is just trying to do the right thing. Obviously, testing is always perspective, so results come out later. There's nothing they can do about that, and it looks like they're trying to do the right thing by, I think, adjusting prize money potentially, and also awarding people their rightful placing. And they're going to do it, I think, at their state show, local show, whatever that may be, where they'll crown that person the placing they deserve, which is, I wouldn't expect anything else. So that's really, really good.
Yeah, good.
I actually was in that situation when I first ever competed. My first ever show back in 2011. I was in first timer. I came second in my division. The guy was amazing. He was either a genetic freak or he was on stuff. And yep, 2 weeks later, he tested positive, and they rang me up and they said, so just letting you know, the person that beat you tested positive. We're going to send you a new trophy in the mail. It's like, all right, fine. But I was like, well, it's done now. Like, I could have been standing in the middle there on the day, but it is what it is.
Yeah, that's shit.
That trophy that I have in my room is a secondary trophy. The first one I got had a second place on it. Now the other one's got a first. And what's disappointing about that too is that person who won the first time division ended up winning the overall, and therefore the person that got second didn't get their shine on the day either. So yeah, that was really hard for that person too. But they did the right thing. They gave that person their trophy the next time they had a show in that state. All right. There's a question for both you boys. MG and Scotty, how did you get into the position of having a team of staff under you? Was that always the goal, and what's next? Maybe you want to start that, MG, because obviously your team is growing. You've got a new member there. So maybe you want to talk about, how did you get in that position where you could hire staff? Was it always the goal to have staff? And what's next?
Yeah, let me think back. Well, I don't think it was ever the initial goal. I think when Meav and I opened up, the goal was just to start what we knew was our dream, right? To have our own facility and just work together. I think, there were probably some very light conversations about future growth, progression, and eventually getting a team, but it certainly wasn't the goal to start up and have a big team. We're 6 now, which is amazing. We just added on Matty Papa, which I think I mentioned in last week's episode, which a lot of people sent me a lovely message about. But the goal was certainly never to start and have a big team. I think, as the business has grown and developed, and one of the things that we talk about a lot on this podcast is, about grinding and paying your dues. And, the more dues we paid over the years, the more hours we put in, the more campaigns we ran, the more, positive reviews we got online, the more athletes that we coached to really great positions, the more inquiries we got that just needed more staff, and progressively we've just taken on more. And at the moment, my team is, as I said before, 6, and everyone's incredible. All people that, I love and respect, which is good. But yeah, definitely wasn't the thing that we wanted to do most when we started. My dream was just to get out of the bank, man. I remember back then, and you remember this too, MT, I was working 2 full-time jobs. I was working the bank in the middle of the day, in the gym morning and night, 7 days a week, because we didn't shut back then. And my only goal was to get out of the bank full time so I could work at the gym full time. And that was all I had in my mind. And I was going to do whatever it took to get to that position. And, whether it was working PTs all day on a Sunday, PTs at 4 a.m, like whatever, I was taking anyone and everyone at any time. I would do like sessions with 5-hour gaps just to get anyone that I could at cheap rates. So the position of having a team has come from just years and years of I suppose hours and hard work, and it's been easier for me. I mean, when you work with your partner, your best friend, your wife, who's got the same vision and has the same sort of goals as you, it definitely makes it a lot easier. It is super fulfilling and super rewarding to have an amazing team under you. Like for me, we're just about to have our first child, and I've got 4 or 5 people now that I can lean on to be able to cover sessions for me and look after people that I've been training for the best part of a decade. And I've got full confidence that everyone's going to be looked after really, really well. So it is a beautiful thing to have. Just it's taken a long time to get there.
And what's next? Do you think it's going to continue to grow? Do you think you're at a level that you're happy with? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, for the facility that we have here, I think a team of 6 fits it out pretty well. I don't think that adding any more in the space that we have would be fruitful when you think about what we sell as a business, the community, the space, the environment. If we start to sort of flood that for volume, then we kind of move away from what we are. So I think we're pretty spot on for the time being. I think, for me, ultimately taking a little bit of a step back eventually from doing as much face-to-face and just focusing on, online, which I love a lot. I love face-to-face too. I don't necessarily want to stop face-to-face altogether because I get such a buzz and a kick out of it. But maybe, 45 sessions a week like I'm doing at the moment is probably not warranted, and it hasn't always been that way. It started that way, then I pulled it back. Now it's back because obviously Maeve is on maternity leave. But I think the vision would be to be in here 1 or 2 days a week, doing some face-to-face selectively, having a full online book, and just focusing time and attention on other things. Like, we've got the retreats. That's super exciting. That to me puts me in a position where I can do some things that I love with people I love, and have some freedom and flexibility to spend time with my family overseas, spend time with my friends overseas. So to me, that's a really enticing venture to invest my time into the future. Will I always have this gym? I think I always will, in some capacity, whether it's me and I move into partnership with someone. I think that's probably, further down the track, but lots of exciting things for what's next, man. I could rattle you off a list, but I also, feel like sometimes maybe I take on a little bit more than I can chew. Always get it done, but certainly feel like I'm someone who performs living like the stress grind life rather than having a lot of time. So like, when I've got a lot of time to do tasks, I tend to procrastinate a little bit. Whereas when it's just go, 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 I tend to get everything done. Remember we talk about that saying, you want something done, give it to the busiest person. I'm better in that sort of category.
Yeah. How about you, Scotty? How did you get into the position that you're in, that you've got staff under you? Was that always the goal? And then what's next?
What I'm doing right now, if you were to ask 5 years ago, did I think I would be doing it? Without sounding arrogant, probably yeah, in the sense that maybe not to the level, but it was definitely a plan that I had to be able to build a working environment that allowed me to have flexibility and to do what I wanted to do on my terms. But equally, I think a lot of people, especially a lot of younger coaches that I work with, see the end destination and they want that straight away. But what they didn't see was the 12 to 15 years prior grinding and hustling. And as MG said, when you first start out, you're working at shit times. When I first opened up Powerhouse, I didn't have any staff. So I ran all of the classes. I was doing 45 to 50 sessions a week, and I was lecturing at uni for about, I was doing about 18 hours of sessional lecturing purely just to get some revenue from that. And that was basically my wage that I lived off, whilst any of the money that I made, I would just invest, buy more equipment, invest in the gym, upgrade, etc. So I didn't really have staff for probably the first 18 months. I was a one-man band, and equally, I do have a bit of OCD and a tendency to want to control everything and make sure that everything's done the way that I want it done. And so finding the right people is always challenging, but I was very fortunate to have good staff. I've obviously got Chris, who's my manager, who, I went to high school with, went to university with. So he he was a really good and I guess a safe bet, knowing that he knew the vision, what I wanted to do. And then stuff, came and went along the way. I also had Zach, and then obviously Was and Ali and Janine. And so I've got 5 staff now. So I think that was always the plan, but equally it takes time to get to that point. And I've definitely pivoted from where I thought I was going to be. I still thought I would probably be doing a bit more face to face, but one of the things that I've taken away from being over here is that I don't really miss that side of it. Granted, I've been doing face to face for a long, long time. And so my time's better spent on some other avenues of the business, and obviously my online coaching. And then, I'm working full time for a professional sporting club in a consulting kind of matter in terms of the nutrition. So whether I look at doing some more stuff of that, there's also the PhD conversation. So there's a lot of stuff. And then there's some other big projects that I have coming up in the pipe works. So there's a lot, as MG said, there's a lot you could just ravel off in terms of what's going to happen. But I think, yeah, moving forward, I'm very fortunate. But at the same time, I've worked pretty hard to put the systems in place that are allowing me to do what I'm doing. But equally, I think moving forward, I'll continue to just sort of be out of the business in terms of the face-to-face gym side of it, because I was taking myself out 6 months prior to leaving for the UK. And equally, everything is still going really, really well, and I don't have to be here. And that's A, because I've got good staff, and B, because of the operational systems we have in place and the model in which we employ. So yeah, so it was definitely the plan, but equally, I've been very fortunate to have such good people. And that's the thing in business: your staff are your number one asset, but equally, your staff can be your number one fucking headache at the same time as well. So having good people is super important with whatever you do in your environment. And I make a point to let them know that they're, very much appreciated and you look after them. And I think that if you do that, they tend to look after you and look after the environment. But like we always say, your circle's so important, whether it's your family, your friends, your working environment. And I think if you invest in that, then obviously the fruits of your labor tend to take care of themselves.
That's awesome. Yeah, both your businesses have evolved so much and continue to do so. So I'm really looking forward to what's in store for the future for both you boys, because you've been really, really successful, and yeah, wish you all the best. It's going to be awesome.
Thanks, bro.
All right, let's move on to the next one. So how can an athlete switch coaches and go from doing crazy amounts of cardio with no response? So, I mean, I think in response in like their progress to
Mhm.
zero cardio and now starting to lose weight. I see the three of you guys do this all the time. So I know we've probably had some examples, some recent examples of someone that's been with someone and they're doing crazy amounts of cardio and all these kind of things, maybe even low calories. They're not getting any progress. And then they move to another coach and they do the complete opposite, and all of a sudden progress comes. So, Scotties, you might want to explain why sometimes doing way too much might not render a result. And when you do the opposite, it actually works.
Yeah, so I guess it comes down to energy balance in that it is a dynamic piece. And so obviously the goal I'm assuming this is relating to getting lean for a show.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you are obviously trying to put in place a deficit that is conducive with you achieving a certain rate of loss and obviously a certain body composition slash look. So sometimes you might have someone, they're doing 2.5 hours of cardio, but equally, what does that cardio look like? What is the intensity at which it's done? What's the heart rate? You look at athletes, they might be doing 2.5 hours and they'll burn 250 calories because the actual quality of it's just garbage because they're just so trash. And as a result of that, their NEAT for the remaining 22 hours of the day is crap. Their training is crap. So yes, they may be investing, time and a volume allocation towards that specific expenditure. But if that then means that for the other 22 hours, you're seeing massive down regulation, then in terms of your expenditure, then obviously it's going to be pretty difficult to try and create that deficit that's required. So sometimes if you take that away, you freshen them up, you wash off some of the fatigue, and you're a little bit more selective in terms of how you acquire that deficit, you start to see a pretty instant response. And most people that are in that position, it's just because their coach maybe doesn't have the experience and maybe the knowledge around, how to, this person's not losing weight, just do more cardio, eat less, as opposed to looking at ironing out some of the other things, like what is their sleep like, what are they doing, how long are they sitting for, what are their steps like, and what sort of steps are they. Are they just dragging their feet, or are they just walking on a treadmill? So there's so many different factors that contribute to it. But for the most part, it's just that the person's accumulated so much fatigue that it is impacting their ability to expend calories for the remainder of the day.
So do you think it could be a component where there's nothing wrong with the plan, but the execution of the plan could be optimized? Or maybe there's other things that are outside of the cardio and the nutrition that need to be optimized to make all that stuff work?
I think, again, context is important, but without knowing exactly what the plan is, I think if you're administering 2-3 hours of cardio like we see some people doing, don't get me wrong, sometimes there's a place where you just have some people and they just have to dig a lot harder than others. Everyone is unique in that aspect. But I think it's very easy to just throw more at someone. But again, it's a trade-off. So you're taking from one side, you need to try and find some compromise on the other, because you're going to see a bit of an inverse relationship in that sense. And I think that if you're not factoring in, like when you make a decision, this may be the outcome that you're looking for, but you have to understand that there's going to be some recoil. I'm going to give this person an extra 45 minutes of cardio. All right, cool. In theory, that should get me maybe another 250 calories expended or 300. But the caveat to that is it may mean that their training performance is going to be really, really shit. Their recovery is going to be really, really bad. Maybe it entices them to eat a little bit more food without them even realizing because of that increase. So, every decision has an opposing consequence. And I think you need to factor that out. And that's the art of coaching, right? Like you need to give that some consideration. But I think for the most part, it's just like if an athlete is adherent and they're following the plan of their coach and they're not getting a result, then obviously something needs to change. And there are some times where you have athletes, and we've all had it, we've had athletes come to you and they're 8 weeks out, and maybe you thought you could salvage them, but it's like there's just not enough, runway here. We've run out of rope. So it's not the right time to continue to push through. And then there's occasions where, you can make some adjustments and you do see a response virtually instantly. And then obviously it takes care of itself. And when people see an increase in food and they're like, oh my God, this coach is a wizard, it's usually just that the increase in food has meant that training intensity has been a lot better. Maybe the training environment has been better. And it usually means that their expenditure and their miscellaneous movement throughout the day is likely a lot higher. So you might be giving an extra 100, 150, 200, but maybe that results in an extra 300-400 calories expended. So one kind of offsets the other.
Okay, so is there a component where, say they're doing everything right, they have to be on low calories, they have to be on X amount of cardio, and the way they are executing it is perfect, but there's just sometimes where you just need to do the opposite for a certain period of time so that you can keep pushing and for that tactic to work.
As in like just a maintenance phase to just freshen them up?
Yeah, yep.
Just give back to the system, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it comes down to. And this is why we use refeeds and diet breaks and just topping up and filling up the tanks before we go again. And again, if you're constantly sucked down for too long, you can obviously run out of rope, and equally you will typically see a little bit more metabolic adaptation versus if you can just give back to the system. Maybe you need to just hold territory, get them feeling good again, increase energy, increase sleep, and then you're in a position, right, okay, cool, now we're going to push again and we're going to dig. And then you'll see a response because you've given the body a period of time where it feels a bit safe, it's not as energy compromised, and then you will see a response.
Yeah. MG, ever been in that scenario where you're giving someone cardio and it's getting pretty high and you're cutting their food and it's getting pretty low and you're like, you know what, we need to do the opposite for a little bit of time to make this work?
All the time. I think the biggest thing that I'll say, and like to answer that question more specifically, the reason why, the three of us are probably able to fix situations like that, or, why we tend to get people constantly progressing across a long period of time is because the three of us are really, really good at long-term planning.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, we're all great at knowing someone's starting position, knowing what we've got to work with, knowing how much time we're going to need along the way to be able to, as we spoke about before, give back to the system. None of us really just dig for 26, 30 weeks straight. We have plans in place. We utilize systems to make sure that the athlete has time to have breaks, give back to the system, and we never run out of rope. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. Sometimes we do. There's athletes, where we think we'd be ready at this time and it takes us a little bit longer. But for the most part, the reason why it probably looks like on the surface that the three of us can get out of problems that other coaches sometimes can't, or why we're able to, you know, I've heard someone say, how did you fix that athlete? We're just great planners. And we're not scared to take a little bit longer to allow for things like breaks, because we've been doing it for long enough to know that, you know, when I first started, I used to always be like, oh, fuck, I can't give a high day. I can't give a high day. Like, it's going to be another week of potentially weight not going down. Now, if you ask me, I would say, like, when I utilize refeed systems, my results post them are fucking amazing. And now I can't wait to get to the refeed day, because I know that it's going to produce me a better result down the track because I plan it so far out. So I think, to answer the question, forward planning is really, really important. And again, the longer you do it, the better you get at it. But ultimately, if you're going into prep with no plan other than what Scott said before, which is do more, eat less, you're going to run yourself into trouble.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to some of the things that you said when you first start out and you're like,
sure, man.
Hang on, do I want to do the opposite? That's a bit counterintuitive. Like,
Man,
what fat loss is all about.
Why would I give this athlete 2 high days? We need to lose weight. What am I doing? What am I doing? My God. Even, like, you know, to go off plan, and we talk about the early days, you know, I don't want her to take 2 seasons off. I need to get back on stage. I need to like, you just become so much wiser, don't you?
Do you want me to tell you the time I really learned that lesson? And I was like, okay, now this is solidified in my head that this really works. Like, I'd used it, but then after this point, I was like, no, this shit fucking works. Is COVID 2020, when everyone's prep was extended for like 8 to 12 weeks. And I was like, sweet,
prep,
food's coming up, maintenance phase for you. And they just kept losing weight on more food. And I was like, okay, all right. Okay, you're proving your point now. I get it. And that's when I was like, okay, doing the opposite may feel counterintuitive, but it's actually a method to get more progress.
It's got a place. It definitely has a really important place, yeah.
And then also, when people had big breaks between shows, so maybe they had 3 shows, but there was like 2-3 weeks between them, and you would see that during a peak week, you're refeeding them, obviously. Then after the show, they would get leaner because of that, let's call it refeed, maintenance, whatever you want to call it, that increase in food and decrease in cardio steps, increase in recovery. I would find that, okay, this all making sense now. Like, giving back to the system because it's a peak week, help them to get leaner for their subsequent shows that were weeks later.
For sure. And then, like, the art of coaching that Scott spoke about is you work out when to utilize these tools. It's not a tool to use all the time, and it's not the same for every athlete. I think all 3 of us would have a pretty basic baseline plan of what we would implement, and then individualize it so that, you know, it might be a week earlier or a week later, depending on where the athlete's at. But yeah, that really is the art of coaching, is like how to utilize these types of strategies at the right time to get someone through a 30-week plan and end up within 500 grams of a weight you set 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything more on that, Scotty?
It's just knowing what variables to change and the volume at which to change them. And then, as we were just saying, the art of coaching is knowing when to make those adjustments. And this is the thing, if you're first starting out, it just takes some time. And there's nothing that you can do other than just doing your Ks and having that experience and trial and error, and you'll learn. And also, just everyone's physiology is different. So some athletes respond differently. There's no like cookie cutter system you can employ. So I think on the topic of forward planning, which, as you mentioned, we're all very big on, you have to be able to troubleshoot and you have to be able to auto regulate. You know, you have a plan. This is the 28-week plan, comp prep plan, but equally you're going, but equally you're going to, it's just because I'm looking out the window and I can see a pram. But equally you have to be able to auto regulate and know, okay, cool, maybe we were planning on this amount of rate of loss, but we've arrived at that a little bit earlier. If we keep digging, is that going to be, you know, advantageous for us, or is it potentially going to be negative? Do you know what? We weren't meant to run that diet break for another 2 weeks, but we're going to pull it forward and run it early. So and don't be afraid to make those changes and to auto regulate, because, and again, the more that you do it, the better that you'll become. But equally, in my opinion, you shouldn't just be following a set, this is what you do every single time. You can have a plan, and that's how you think it will pan out. But equally, as long as you communicate it with the athlete, we're going to auto regulate as we need to as we go forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Coach wants to update my training program every 4 weeks, but it feels too quick. Should I say something? So, Scotty, changing training programs too frequently. Maybe want to talk a little bit about, what happens when we start a program, understanding and learning the movement pattern first, then we start to get stronger, then we start to put on some tissue. That takes time, and it really, 4 weeks sometimes isn't enough to get into that final phase of actually doing some growing.
Yeah, I think too often consistency and repeatability isn't very sexy. So everyone likes, I need a different program. I've got to shock the muscle, as opposed to investing from a skill acquisition perspective on a certain exercise and then running it until you hit the ceiling. And what I mean by that is until where you are just no longer able to elicit progress. And when I say that, I'm not talking about you've gone 2 weeks and you couldn't get any progression via load or via volume. There are times where you just need to dig, and you may not see improvement for 4 or 5 weeks, but you just hang in there and then bang, you get this whoosh. And sometimes it's not because it's the programming, it's the factors outside of that. It's sleep, it's fluid, it's nutrient timing, it's the amount of food that you're eating. There's so many moving parts that go into it, but if you are constantly adjusting your exercise selection, you're not giving yourself an opportunity to make, and it's unnecessary. You're not giving yourself that opportunity to make progress. Versus if you have, 90% of your movement selection is consistent from mesocycle to mesocycle, and cycle, maybe it's anywhere from 6 to 10 weeks, depending on how it's going. You're giving yourself an opportunity to acquire the movement and learn it from a skill acquisition perspective, which sometimes can take 2, 3, 4 weeks. If you're talking about a squat or a deadlift pattern, it could take 2 or 3, 4, mesocycles. It's one of those things where you just got to keep beating on your craft. But if you get the basics right and the mechanics right, then you're in a position where you can actually deposit stress to targeted tissue rather than just trying to move the load from A to B. And so I think in a lot of younger coaches and a lot of younger athletes, that's sort of what they go to. And I'll just do this and I'll do that today, and then next week I'll do that. And it's kind of hard quantitatively to be able to measure progression. But I mean, if you know that your numbers are moving up on the logbook and you're eating enough protein, you're getting enough sleep, and you're in a mild surplus, then, the chances are that you're definitely acquiring new contractile tissue. And then the key is just doing those things and those basics time and time and time again. And I use the analogy that we're making deposits or withdrawals. So if you're willing to be consistent and to be perhaps a little bit more robotical on that front, then the deposits will begin to acquire. And then, maybe after 12 months, 14 months, you run a tidy out phase and you take a peek underneath the hood and see what new tissue is there. And that is essentially what bodybuilding is all about, as opposed to just trying to make changes and reinvent the wheel. That doesn't need to be done. It's not what everyone probably wants to hear, but equally just simplicity is one of the most, I guess, optimal approaches, provided that you're doing all those basic fundamentals right.
Yeah. How about UMG? How long you normally keep a program for? And
oh man, I would hate to change every 4 weeks personally. That would just, man, 4 weeks, I'm just hitting my strides. For me personally, I will probably do my clients more often, but Scott knows I'd be happy to change a program twice a year for myself, because I just love doing the same thing over and over and trying to get a little bit better. But yeah, 4 weeks.
But equally on that, like what would you, MG, just as a good example, your exercise selection. So for example, your previous mesos, would you say you've had a lot of variation in your exercise selection, or would you have run the exact same movements for probably the last 6 to 8 months?
I mean, we haven't changed the whole lot.
Yeah, maybe 1 or 2 pieces if you need to, based on you might have a niggle or something, or maybe every 6 months you hit a ceiling on a movement. But
I actually,
equally,
the last time we spoke about it, I asked, because I was like, I'm loving the block, man. I had some plateau weeks, but things are starting to pick up again. Can we leave it? Can we let it go again? And you're like, yeah, let's let it go. Like, I'm not looking for like new fancy exercises. I might say to you every now and then, hey, they just went through a restructure. There's a couple of new pieces. Can I just use that one instead of that one? It's the same movement plane. It's no different. And maybe it's a more comfortable position. But for the most part, we probably haven't made more than 5 or 6 changes in 6 months. And it's been great. I love it. Yeah, I just wouldn't want to be having to reaccustomize myself to a new piece or a new movement pattern every 4 weeks, and feel like I could get better at it. It just wouldn't happen. I mean, what do they say? It takes 100 hours to be really great at something, and if you're changing every 4 weeks, you're barely getting 10 hours at something. So
Yeah. Same with my programming, Scotty. Like we don't change a lot unless I've got a niggle or an injury. Or
Hmm.
I might only change things out if like I'm uncomfortably overloading that machine, like I'm getting to the bottom of the stack or I'm putting way too many plates on it. I'll be like, I'm gonna
Yeah,
swap
you
this
run out of
out.
room.
Yeah, like I'm
Hmm.
just like this is just getting a bit much. I'll swap it out for a different machine or variation. But other
yeah,
than that, like I know what things because I'm an old man, like I know what works good for my shoulders and stuff and what doesn't, what's going to cause an issue, what's going to cause tendonitis or something like that. So I like to stick to things because I know it works well. I don't want to change it, right? I'm actually the opposite. I don't want to change it.
Hmm.
I might just change, you put in there intensity techniques and things like that. So to make the same movement harder in different ways. And that's how I like to do it. I like to stick to the same stuff
Hmm.
all the time. And unless like a machine comes in, like when that pendulum squat machine came in, I was like, Scotty, next program, I'm jumping on that bad boy for sure. Like
Hmm.
otherwise, I'm keeping it all the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And this is the thing. I think if you were to survey the top athletes within natural bodybuilding, male or female, you can guarantee that from an exercise selection perspective, there's not a lot of variance, until they get to that point where, like you said, they've either maxed out on the stack or there's no more progression. They've hit that ceiling. And then maybe it's time to switch the piece. And it might be instead of going with an incline Smith press, maybe you're like, I'm going to run dumbbells for a bit and see how that moves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
have we got time for one more question? Can I just bring something up that's not on this question list, but someone asked me today and I looked it up and I thought it was interesting. Did anyone see Hunter Labrada's post this week?
No, go.
So Hunter Labrada did a post and said, when they asked me why I only do 7 sets for my legs, I showed them this. And he basically showed all 7 of his working sets on his leg day. And the message was they were all pretty fucking intense, right? Like he's fucking leaving nothing in the tank. And someone said, how can a guy like that get away with doing 7 sets for legs? And it's enough. And I thought it would be an interesting thing to talk about because there's, quite a few reasons why someone like that might get away with doing 7 sets. And I just thought you guys might have seen it because I thought you followed him as well.
Yeah. Any insight on that, Scotty? Like we call that low volume,
Yeah. And Scott, let's
Yeah,
just say they're all to genuine failure, right? 7
Yeah,
sets.
you probably you'd call that low volume, but equally volume distribution should be bespoke to the individual based on, a SWOT analysis of one's for physique. So you look at someone, so he's got crazy wheels, so he doesn't need a whole lot of volume allocation there. And so, if it's for quads, he only needs 7 sets. Was it 7 sets for anterior and posterior? Okay, so maybe like 3 or 4 for each, but equally, he may have enough tissue there that he doesn't need to. He's not trying to grow his legs, and you actually, in order to be able to maintain muscle, you actually don't need that volume in terms of like to be able to just hold on to tissue. Not talking about hypertrophy, but as long as you're creating cellular swelling and you're getting that build up of metabolites, you're creating a ton of mechanical tension. You're usually going to see some muscle damage and enough, provided that you're working at decent intensities, in order to keep those cellular signaling proteins switched on and activated, so that you're not breaking down tissue and you're able to hold territory on that. It's actually, once you get to a point of, this is how much muscle mass I have, it's really not that hard to be able to retain it. Obviously, if you're eating enough food, and like you said, the intensity at which he's training at. But if you survey, say some upcoming bodybuilder, and maybe he does 20, without knowing what they look like, I could say with quite a lot of certainty that he wouldn't be taking them to the same level of proximity of failure that what Hunter Labrada would be in terms of the intensity. And as a result of that, he wouldn't be getting that same response from a cellular signaling perspective that obviously Hunter would. And obviously, enhanced makes a difference as well. But I think if you're just like blanket statement, 12 sets for this, 12 sets for that, then you really aren't painting the most optimal picture for one's physique. You should be looking, okay, I need more attention to this area of my body, so I'm going to do X amount of sets. For example, I only have 12 working sets on my back in terms of pulling based movements because it's at the moment that I'm not trying to target. But if I look at my anterior chain, there's closer to 20 to 22 working sets over the entirety of the week. So I think you might have a female, maybe they're really dominant on their quads. And so allocation, he won't mind me saying this. I'll say Ethan, for example, he's got huge quads. So we only have 6 working sets of quads in his programming a week. but there's a bit more of a focus on hamstrings, but even then, I think it's like 9. But equally, he has a lot more allocation to his chest because it's a lagging body part. So I think you need to look at it from a perspective of where do I need to distribute that? And then obviously painting, obviously that volume where you need it.
Yeah. I was just watching one of his working sets just that I saw it because it's the post starts with a deadlift, but then you see he's got 2 spotters on a 15-plate side leg press, knees to his mouth, and like having to get the spotters to help him with the last 2 reps. So like
and he's got bands as well. So he's obviously, is that bands as well? Yeah. So he's obviously increasing the intensity at the top of the movement as well. So
all of them is like, you know, all of his are logged and recorded every week, and he's always finding progressive overload. So like it's 7 sets, but it's more than it was last week.
Yeah. My question would be is what method did he use to get his legs to where they are now? Did he use this?
I mean, I've watched videos for years, and he's always done a little bit more than that.
Yeah. So maybe he's just maintaining
more like 12 to 14.
Yeah, he could be maintaining them or slowing, maybe less growth on them because he's using that volume somewhere else potentially. It'd probably be more like, what did he do to get them where they're at now? I don't know if the 7 sets would have been his approach all the way through his training career.
Probably
but
not in his early days.
One thing I would say is, as a natural and as you get a little bit older, I'm probably more of a volume guy where I'd rather do more sets and not so much heavy load, low reps because my joints are going to give way one day. So I'd rather it to be a little bit more joint friendly from my part. So if someone said, all you're going to do is 7 sets on your quads, but they've got to be all out and it's all heavy as you can go and it's all low reps, I'll be like, nah, it ain't for me. My knees are going to be broke by the end of the week. So I'd rather still train with intensity, but maybe a little bit more volume.
And equally, there's other ways to approach that rather than just when MT is saying a bit more volume. That doesn't mean that he's doing 11 different exercises for quads. It may mean that you're utilizing, like, say, a rest pause partial cluster set. So maybe you have 2 working sets of a certain exercise. You have 3 or 4 intensity bouts there afterwards where you're taking those cluster sets to, you know, close proximity, if not complete failure in the lengthened position. And so as a result of that, you acquire a lot of volume within that amount of obviously of time on that specific exercise without having to go to then a leg extension and then a single leg extension and then a pistol squat and then a goblet squat. And that isn't necessary. So instead it's looking at what you're doing and ways that you can manipulate your training to still elicit that same outcome. Because essentially, if you're trying to make a muscle grow, you have to disrupt homeostasis. So you're placing an insult on the body that disrupts that, and that obviously forces it to adapt to the environment that you've exposed it to. And if you're eating enough and you get protein and you sleep, that's how you grow.
Yeah. I'm also coming from the part of I'd rather be lifting lighter loads, lighter weight to save my joints. So still training with the same intensity to failure, everything exactly the same, but utilizing a lighter load to get the same result.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that old, I know it's not probably the best example, but it's just a popular example is, you know, Ronnie Coleman lifting super heavy weight all the time in a wheelchair now. Jay Cutler was more about lighter load, but still training with maximum intensity. The guy's in his 50s and he's still training like he's in his 20s. So
yeah, and it's not to say that you can't, you need to load, you need to put some decent load on, but there's a difference between I'm going to do a hack squat and I'm going to stick 2 plates. I can, you know, get some really good stimulus versus I'm going to try and back squat 5 plates aside for 3 reps and beat yourself up, because you've got to look at it longitudinally as well. I mean, Jay still lifted heavy, but maybe not to nowhere near the same extreme as Ronnie, but equally he might do his top sets for 8 to 10 reps with like 4 plates aside versus Ronnie might have done fucking 6, 7 plates for like 3 reps. And as you said, he just broke his body. So you know, you have to be sensible in your approach. And obviously, as you get older, you need to be mindful of connective tissue. You know, there's no point doing 3 or 4 reps of a heavy weight if you're fucked and then you can't train for 2 weeks, because that hurts your ability to acquire new tissue. So, and that's something that as you get older, you train with a lot more intent and a lot more intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. On that, the next question that we'll jump onto is about injuries and training around injuries. So, hi guys, love the podcast. Do you have any recommendations on recovery after an operation? I'm having ankle surgery next week and I'll be off the gym for at least a month. So there's that question. And also just a follow-up for a different question. Any tips for how to train around injuries, niggles, flare-ups, and things like that when you aren't able to train normally? So maybe you want to talk, I know MG just went through an injury with, actually give us an update. How is the ankle? How is everything?
No, the foot's good. The broken foot's good. Probably a better one to use as an example, which Scott had to coach me through, was my knee surgery.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, there was some parameters that, we put in place just to put me in a better position. Equally, I think I was of the attitude, which, obviously Scott supported at the time, that, I was off for knee surgery. So I was only going to be off training upper body for 2 days, even though I couldn't train legs for 3 or 4 weeks, maybe more. I was certainly going to be in there doing what I can. So my first question would be, is it possible for you to, it was ankle surgery, right? To still potentially get in there and do upper body. But Scott, you want to talk about what you put in place in terms of increased protein and that type of stuff to just, put me in a better position to avoid any sort of atrophy of the muscles in the area that was being treated?
Yeah, well, maybe even I was going to say, you lived through it. So talk about some of the things that we did, because I'm happy to touch on some of the rationale behind afterwards, but maybe just give an example of what we did with you, how you approached it.
Yep. So we obviously changed the program at that point to split volume a little bit strategically, so that my days in the gym were, there were so many exercises that I couldn't do. So we changed the split, and I think we moved to 3 upper days and an accessory day for the first few weeks. The big thing was around protein consumption, right? So protein went, probably 50 to 70 grams more than usual, because my expenditure overall was going down. So, where I would normally on a normal working day, just from doing my job, would do, 14 to 18,000 steps, that was going straight down to virtually nothing. So the only expenditure that I would have, and, whilst I couldn't walk, was, getting up, moving around the house, plus the 3 upper body sessions that I would come in and do in the gym. So that's a fair difference. If you work out 15,000 steps by 7 days and completely remove all of that in terms of how many calories you burn per day, it is a substantial difference. I can't remember what phase we were in at the time and what the goal was. It was post-comp. It was just after comp, I think. So, because I remember finishing up my comp and being like, oh, I can have my knee surgery now. So we would have just maybe gone through a reverse and probably been in the first stage of our off season.
Yeah, right? I think so. Yeah, it was early. Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately for us, it was about staying as active as possible. There was a lot that I wasn't able to do for a long period of time, but we still utilized, time to make sure that we weren't going backwards, which I think is important. So I just remember hearing in the question that you'll be off the gym for a month. And my first question is, do you need to be off the gym for a month, or potentially just off lower body for a little bit?
Yeah. So in summary, obviously your activity, your energy output was down. So therefore you had to reduce your calories, but you increased your protein to help with recovery. And then you basically got in the gym and you could train the things that you could train until your knee started to recover. And then slowly you start to implement some more exercises. I'm assuming you had a separate rehab program from.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to get to next. So the physiotherapist, which we use, which is Ben Elastic, which, Scott put me onto, and now, everyone that I deal with has been to Ben. We all 3 of us kind of work in conjunction, and Ben will put a plan together, and then Scott will go and incorporate that into whatever my program was for that week. So that actually formed part of my training days, because there was plenty to do. So, even though you're going in for ankle surgery, there's probably no reason why there's still not 4 reasonable days of training that you can do between your upper body and rehab work, as well as, potentially for me, even after, my foot, the broken foot, there was still so many accessory movements I could do on lower body once I found my feet, with isolated single leg extensions and hamstring curls and stuff. So I think there's going to be plenty of potential for you to still progress. And I think a month off the gym is probably not going to be needed.
And just on that with MG, we reduced his calories from where they were because they were very high, but equally we were very conscious that we didn't want him to lose weight, because one of the number one tools that you have at your disposal to enhance recovery when you are coming off an injury, let alone having surgery, and you're going to see some immobilization, is energy balance. So do we want to be in a surplus? No, but we definitely don't want to be in a deficit, because that does hinder the recovery process. So we still made sure, and using your star weight as a proxy to ensure that you're not in a position where you're losing weight, so that you are giving your body sufficient energy, because post-surgery, I mean, there's research to suggest that you'll see an increase by like 50% above baseline in terms of your resting metabolic rate purely as a result of all of those inflammatory and healing processes that are taking place. But equally, you're not going to be as active as you usually were. So you kind of have to find that happy median where you're not losing weight, but you're not gaining weight. It's really important that you are. That's the number one thing that I would usually say, you know, aside from obviously protein feeding and the amount, is just making sure that energy balance is not compromised.
And then what if someone has small niggles, small injuries, small little things that they're just tackling and dealing with on a weekly, daily basis, and they still really want to train and train like normal? What are some of the things that you would say to them? Obviously, you know, I'd still be getting them treated and checked and looked at and making sure you're following rehab and you're doing your stretches and your activation drills and your warm-ups, and I'd be doing everything I possibly can to make sure it's recovering and it's healing. But what advice would you give Scotty on how to tackle their training during that time?
Well, you still want to be training because, again, we know whether it's if it's a mobilization, proteolysis, so the breakdown of protein is inevitable. And you see especially in the first few days, you can see a massive reduction in and a loss of muscle tissue. So that's why it's so important that you get energy balance right and that you feed protein to try and attenuate that. But there's also, again, there's a lot of research that's been done, and they use examples of someone, say that, I don't know, you broke your left ankle, but you can still move your right. So exercising the right leg, even if it means you just walking on it, or you were to do some single leg curls, it contributes to a reduction in the amount of muscle loss that you would lose on the injured leg. So the more that you can move and the more that you can try and stimulate muscle protein synthesis, it does go a long way in terms of preventing, you know, atrophy of the injured limb or whatever that may be. And then the other big thing that we obviously know is making sure that you're having protein, and ideally a little bit more. So if you were having 2 grams, you know, I think the exact measure, I think it's around about 2.3 or 2.4 grams per kilo of body weight is where the literature is recommended based on that. So I think if you round it up and said, I'm going to have 2.5 or even higher, it's not going to make a difference, just to make sure that you're doing that. And you also want to space out those protein feedings. And then there's things like collagen and vitamin C. So that's another thing. If someone's had surgery on a connective tissue, I'll usually recommend that. I've got like a recipe that you can give as jellies. And that's something that I've incorporated with the Saracens players. All of our players have that pre-weights, just because there's some research to say that it does prevent and assist in collagen synthesis, so helping your connective tissue. So if you were to get an injury, it can prevent potentially the damage and also can help speed it up. So things like that. But you definitely, if you can train, I think you definitely should be. The key is to not exacerbate the injured limb, whatever it may be. But if it was a shoulder and you can't train upper body, then I would recommend that you're definitely still training legs, because it will still help assist from some of that atrophy. And then just being selective with what you can do and what you can't do, and then being patient. And as a rule, and this is one of the biggest things that I took away from Ben Lustig, and I refer to it as the Lustig traffic light system. So anything that is greater than a 3 out of 10 pain, then you just shut it down. And I think we've all, when we're a bit younger, been a bit, you know, heroic in that I'll just push through the pain, but equally nothing really good happens over a threshold of 3 out of 10 pain.
Just quickly before we go, what's your little collagen vitamin C recipe that you can share with us?
As in, like, what is it? So it's just mashing up some vitamin C, and then use beef gelatin, mainly because collagen is very expensive, and beef gelatin has the exact same amino acid profile as collagen, so it's a little hack that it's cheap. So we use that, some orange juice, and then vitamin C, and then they get made up into these like little jellies. So the chefs at Saris have mastered them, so it's amazing. So I'll take a photo and I'll send it to you guys at training. But they just taste like little orange lollies, but equally you want to have like around I think the dosage, it's 15 milligrams and 50 megs of vitamin C. But equally, I'll send you the recipe that I use, and you can post it if you want. So if someone wants to take them, I would have them all the time back home, but I'm too lazy to make them. But equally, I have them every week now because the chefs make them for us. So
yeah, awesome. I'm thinking of a product to sell, like a little meal prep product. Maybe if they keep, we can bloody pump them out and sell them. There's nothing like that in the market.
Do you know what? There's actually not, and it's a very, very cost effective way, especially using beef gelatin. It doesn't. I mean, I think we get like 120 delivered each day at training, and they just have it before they go and do weights, and it just tastes like kind of eating a soft, chewy sort of lolly. So they're pretty good. But yeah, you could. I'll have to ask because the first few ones they made, they were a bit iffy, but after about 3 or 4 goes, they've nailed them. I might have to him to share the secret on it. But as far as I know, it's the exact same recipe that I've recommended. Everyone else that I've worked with back home that has had surgery has made them, and equally reported that they still come out pretty good. So maybe you can start baking with them, MT, and just put them together, and then we'll find a manufacturer and we can sell them.
Yeah. Okay. No one steal that idea. Everyone block your ears. You didn't hear that bit. All right.
Yeah, it wasn't vitamin C, it was vitamin E.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it wasn't orange juice, it was pear.
And it wasn't. Was it gelatin?
Beef collagen.
It wasn't collagen.
It wasn't beef gelatin. Yeah, it wasn't beef gelatin. No.
It was airplane jelly.
To be fair, that actually has beef gelatin in it as well.
Oh, does it? Okay.
So you can use jelly.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so you could use it for jelly because that's essentially what gives it that mold, that
Mhm.
sort of shape. Or, if funds aren't an issue, you could just take collagen and just mix it with some vitamin C. But it's nicer to just eat the jellies.
You ruin our sales pitch, bro. Don't tell them that.
Yeah.
Given all the marketing tools.
Then collagen's very expensive.
There you go. See? Cheaper method and more tasty and more
Yeah,
filling.
it's just like the cream, and it's just like the cream of rice. Rather than buying the pre-made ones, you do your own Prep Coach podcast version.
Yeah, true.
Yes.
All right, boys. It was awesome catching up. We made it to the end. This thing's going to save. We're going to upload it. We've got Scotty back. I'm super keen.
Yep.
Enjoy your day, Scotty. It's just starting. MG, enjoy your sleep.
Well, guys, this might be my last podcast for a few weeks.
Oof. I can't wait for the news. Can't wait for the text message.
Yeah, we're 39 weeks now, man. So it could be any minute. Oh.
I'm excited.
Hold on, what MT? Before we go off, let's predict a date. What's your prediction?
I don't know why 24 is in my head, like Saturday the 24th. I don't know why. Yours?
Okay, I'm gonna say February 21st.
Okay, 21st. Okay. Maybe we should get people to put their predictions in. Just DM
Yeah,
them.
do
I've
it.
got a competition here at the gym this month. Weights and dates.
Okay.
And
Everyone,
date.
if you're still listening, wait and date. DM the podcast. I can't wait because I have to deal with all the DMs, but that's okay. That's okay.
Weights and dates.
Okay, give us a weight, Scotty, quick.
3.15.
315. I'm gonna go 288. What's your prediction, MG?
Yeah, bro, throw yours in.
I mean, she was 3 kilos at the 36-week scan, so
I'm out.
you're fucking out.
Yeah, but the only thing with that is, man, that they're not accurate. That was the same with Harvey. He was meant to be 4 kegs at 38, and he came out at 3.5.
I just feel like it'll be above 3.4. It's my guess. Something 3 plus, I reckon. Yeah.
And the date? What are you thinking?
22nd. Yeah, it's just take it as it comes. We're not being induced or anything like that. So
okay, Scotty's 21st. You're 22nd, and I'm 24th. All right, it's on.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Yep.
All right, guys.
All right, boys.
Take care.
We'll chat soon.
Ciao, ciao.
See you, boys.